study of Christianity and politics. I want to welcome you to this evening's address. I'm Corwin Smith, Director of the Henry Institute. The Henry Institute was created in 1997 to continue the work of integrating the Christian faith and politics, an effort that was clearly evident in the life and work of educator and public servant Paul Henry. One of the activities of the Institute is its annual Paul Henry Lecture, and tonight marks the 12th such lecture. We thank you for your interest in tonight's lecture and your presence here tonight, and we trust that you will find the presentation and discussion to be stimulating and the evening to be an enjoyable time together. Following tonight's lecture, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers, and at the conclusion of the discussion, you are all invited to attend the reception that will be held in the lobby here at the back of the hall. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, would you please join with me in a word of prayer? Our gracious and sovereign God, we praise you for your creation, your faithfulness to us, and the mercy you have shown us. We acknowledge our dependence upon you, and we gather this evening seeking to be your faithful servants in your kingdom work. We ask for your leading and direction, as well as insight and discernment as we endeavor to fulfill our public responsibilities. We thank you for the life of Paul Henry, for his Christian convictions, his passion for justice. And we are grateful, too, for the work and witness of our speaker, Dean Koldenhoven. As you have instructed us, we pray for those who are entrusted to rule over us. We pray that you will provide them with discernment and wisdom as they confront the many complex and contentious issues that are brought before them. Enable them to balance rightfully and skillfully the demands of their principles and convictions with the needs to find solutions that can be achieved. Help us to seek justice, to act with mercy, to walk humbly, and to bear witness to your name in both word and deed. We ask that you will enable us then to be your faithful servants, and bless us to your service. We pray all this in the name of Jesus and through his word. Amen. Well, it is a personal pleasure and honor for me to introduce tonight's speaker, Dean Koldenhoven, former mayor of Bayless Heights, Illinois, and recipient of the 2002 John F. Kennedy Profiles in Courage Award. Each year, the Henry Institute brings to its campus a prominent political practitioner for a public lecture on the interplay of religion and public life. These lectures seek to be nonpartisan in nature, focusing more on how our particular beliefs and values should shape the way in which we, as Christians, engage in political life. As you can see from your program, we have had prominent national figures deliver these addresses, including those who served in the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of the federal government. We've had important state legislators also deliver these addresses. But this is the first time that we've had a mayor do so, and one who at that only served one term as mayor. And yet, tonight is the first time that the annual Henry Lecture has featured a speaker who's been the recipient of a Profiles in Courage Award, who, when he received the award, did so alongside Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan. Mr. Koldenhoven does not hold advanced academic degrees. He's not served in high public office. He's not written nuanced philosophical treatises on the relationship between the Christian faith and public life. Rather, he's a man of convictions who's acted on his convictions of his Christian faith during his service in public life. Personal self-interest or even political prudes might have suggested otherwise, but these were not the paths chosen by our speaker. And so tonight, we will hear from a man who acted on the basis of his Christian convictions during his tenure as mayor of Bayless Heights, Illinois. The title of his address this evening is Religious Tolerance. How far does love your neighbor, go. So would you please join with me in welcoming Mr. Koldenhoven to Calvin's campus.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, and I thank Dr. Smith for the introduction and for all the hospitality, and to Ellen Heckman, who takes care of all the details. There's a lot of details in this. You did an excellent job, and I appreciate people that do that job well. It's very nice. The Henry Institute, Paul Henry, started as an educator, Calvin, from 1970 to 78. He had a distinguished career in the Michigan House, at the State House, in the Senate and in the House. Then he went on to be a U.S. House of Representatives in 84 to 93. What a distinguished career that was. He was a public servant, always searching for justice. It's good to be here and speaking at the Institute. I want to say hello to all the friends and relatives. I don't want to name anybody because I forget one person and I'd be in trouble. So thank you, friends and relatives, for being here. Appreciate it. The little history on myself. I was born in Chicago. We're the only Dutch Protestants raised in the Irish Catholic neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. There's two things you had to be to live there. You had to be a Chicago White Sox fan, and you had to be a Notre Dame football fan. That made life easier. We lived there till the age of 15 in the city. We moved to a farm. My dad bought a farm, and I had a great life. I had my horses that I was always in love with, and I still ride a horse to this day. It was a great life on the farm. I got interested in politics because on the farm, I also had to work for two other farmers that when the certain crops came in, like asparagus, they can come in overnight. They needed extra help, and I was one of those kids who was available for the extra help. And I worked for a man by the name of Mr. Dyke, wood farmer, and he was a Republican precinct captain. Now, a precinct captain in Chicago is a person in the Chicagoland area. They get the vote out, they get the literature out for all the candidates that run for public office. That's their job. The only privileges they get is if somebody needs a job in a certain place, they can help out that person to get a job through the political system. It's called patronage. It's legal, but it can be done nicely and it can be done not so nicely. But where we did it, it really was done nicely. So it was a nice, that's the only advantage of the job, other than working hard and getting that literature out. It was nice getting it out for the family. When I got married young and had kids, as soon as they were old enough to run, they were running with me to bring literature to the doorsteps and ring doorbells and talk about a certain candidate to get the vote out for them. It was a good experience. I graduated Chicago Christian High School on a Friday night. Monday morning, I was a bricklayer. I laid brick for 42 years. 36 of those 42 years was as a contractor, and I sell brick for the last 12 years, and I still sell brick, so brick is my life. I got interested in Payless Heights. Mayor Simpson, who was mayor of Payless Heights at the time, asked me if I would serve as a zoning commissioner, and because of my construction experience, and I said, certainly I will. And I did that job. It's a volunteer job. Did it for 8 years, and I got interested in the political system of Payless. At the time, the aldermen were picking very badly on the mayor as a woman mayor, and they were really against her. And I knew Robert's Rules of Order very well, parliamentary procedures, so I tried to help her. And couldn't help her enough because the other aldermen put up a candidate for mayor that he would just be a puppet of those aldermen. And I didn't like that idea, so I put my name in to run. I never had ideas to run for mayor, but I did because I seen what was happening. I didn't like it, so I thought there's only one way to fix it, and that's jump in. I got elected. It was only about 156 votes, but you only need one vote to win, so it was okay. As mayor, I had the usual problems. There was a fence dispute. I think every town and hamlet and place in America at one time or another has a fence dispute. Well, we hit ours, ended up in court, the usual things happen. But during that 4-year term of office, I had a good 4 years, because going through it, I raised $9 million in grants for our town. That's a good figure for a town of only 12,000 people. We raised $2 million in grants for a metro station because it was federal grant. It started out at $2 million. The station ended up costing $6 million. So that's a typical federal job. Money grows. And we built a police station, a $3.5 million brand new police station that was built with drug asset forfeiture funds. We get those funds by 2 of our police officers were assigned to customs. And when they go out and make a drug raid, they don't do it so much for the drugs as they do for the money. And any money they confiscate is divided up by the government through whatever police agencies were involved in that raid. And we get about 5 to 6% of what's taken on a raid. So if they had a raid at one night that they showed me what they had, it was an $875,000 raid. So we get money, a percentage of money from that, and that's what built this police station. We only started out with a grant of $375,000 from the state. The rest of the money was all from drug money. So we're glad to spend the drug money on a good thing. And things were going well as a mayor. Things were going right along after 3 years of being mayor. And then word on the street was, you know the expression, word on the street? There was going to be some Arabs or Muslims buying the church that was for sale in our town. There are 11 churches in Payless Heights. They all happen to be Christian. The Payless Reformed Church set up for sale their church on a private market. By that I mean they asked other churches, say, hey, our church is going to sell it. Would you be interested in it? Because some churches get a certain size, they want to grow, or they want to decrease, either way. And they went around for about 2 years and asked around. They had nibbles, but nobody really took the bait. They didn't need it. So they asked the city of Payless Heights, would you like to buy our church? It's for sale. They met with our committee, and they had it in study for 3 months in 1998. They studied it, and they didn't come out of committee. It died in committee. They said all the excuses that they didn't want to buy it. It was too expensive. We don't have the money. It cost too much to remodel. All these things would go against us, so they didn't want it. Along came the Al Salam Mosque Foundation. They put a deposit to purchase the church. At the council meeting in City Payless Heights, the average crowd is 20 to 30 people. And those people are usually ones that have some business to do. They want to know what the city council is going to decide, something that matters to them. And there's also people that they're sick of TV, they'd rather come to a city council meeting and see how we make comedy too, you know. So that's the average crowd is 20 to 30 people. This particular night, there was over 100 people, and for the size room that we had at City Hall, that's overflowing. And we got overflow crowd, we got speakers in the hallway to accommodate those who just listen to it without even seeing what's going on. And that was full. And on the agenda, there's about 5 spaces down on the agenda. It says citizens wishing to address the city council, and that means on whatever subject they want to ask. And I believe in the freedom of speech where they can ask any question and we will answer it if we can. There's no swearing or cussing allowed. When they get up to speak, they cannot address each other in the crowd. They must address it always to the mayor, and the mayor handles the questions. If he assigns it to an alderman, that can be done. But they never talk to each other, and that's the key order, because otherwise 2 people can be fighting about a fence dispute, you know, so that's why it's done that way. And then the remarks against the Muslim people started coming in. I thought, well, where did this come from? Because the word on the street was that they were interested in buying a church. And then the residents and aldermen made a lot of bad remarks about the situation. The one alderman said, your religion is like upside down. You have You worship on Fridays where we worship on Sundays. It's like apples and oranges. She started out as like a friend to the Muslims, but she ended up being an enemy. And that's one of her remarks that she said that really embarrassed the Muslim people that were there. Also, another alderman said, if someone had intervened early on to stop Adolf Hitler, there might not have been a world war. What he was saying was, if we stop the Muslims from buying this church, they won't move in here. Well, little did they know there was already 450 families living in Bayless Heights, in the Bayless area. The residents tried to persuade the alderman to buy the church for their sudden need for recreation. They said the church is needed, so they had this sudden need. They went so far as to want condemnation proceedings. They wanted eminent domain. That's a law that can be good and it can be bad. It generally is used in government by, if a town needs a water tower location up, nobody likes to see a water tower, but it's needed, and they acquire property for the city or the municipality that way. That's the good intent of the law. But where it was to say to get the money to buy a church to keep the Muslims away, that's the bad intent of the law. So it did not work out. So they went so far as to take a vote for eminent domain. The alderman made the motion, it lost, because Bayless Heights experienced a bad experience with eminent domain on another case which they lost. It cost the city dearly some years earlier. So that vote lost with the experience of that one going bad. Fortunately, it didn't go to the eminent domain. There was an attorney that lived 2 doors south of me, and on a Saturday morning, I'm working out in the front yard, and he says, walks over and he says, what about our home values? What's going to happen when the Muslims move in? And I says, when are you moving? And he didn't like that, and he walked away. He happened to be going to the same church that I go to. What he did was he acted as pro bono attorney for the people that wanted eminent domain. And they went out and gathered over 1,700 signatures to get that eminent domain. So the night that they got all those signatures to give to the alderman, they had to present it to me, and he made a long speech, and he meant really well, but I know the intention that he had. And he gave me all the 1,750-some signatures, and I just took them, gave them to the city clerk next to me, and I said, noted in the minutes that we got the signatures. That's all those signatures did, because they did not have the vote to get eminent domain. But he went through the trouble of doing it. Excuse me for 1 minute. Residents tried to persuade the alderman in many other different ways too. They had a lot of neighborhood meetings that they met and tried to persuade the alderman to get this church no matter what it would do. Father Cronin was a Catholic priest from St. Al's Church. He heard about it. He came to the meeting. And he said, I will not be part of any movement to derail any churches or religious organization the opportunity to worship. And anyone who is should be ashamed of themselves. The home for a new recreation center can be found elsewhere. We had many meetings, got so bad and so crowded, we finally made a motion to go to the regular recreation center. It's a former school, and we used the gymnasium. Over 400 people were at the meeting with a lot of Muslims attending. I persuaded the Muslim people, I says, please come to the meeting so the people can meet you. And at the start of each meeting, we start with each in their own way, ask for guidance. That's our form of a silent prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And there were many people who told me that I must do what they want me to do. They said, you got to listen to the people and you got to do what we want. They said, look at all the people that come out. These are all the people that do not want the Muslims here. We want that church for recreation. And I had explained to them this way. I said, the republic, and to the republic for which it stands, republic is a form of government whereby you elect your officials and they make the decisions for you for the good of the people. And I said to them, I do this for the good of the people. There's 12,000 residents in Bayless Heights. I don't listen to 120 naysayers. I says, that's my decision to make. I won't be persuaded by you to make that decision because it's not for the good of the people. And also at the Pledge of Allegiance, there were pictures that the newspaper took, and I'll pass these out to you in a minute. If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Court, pass them out to the audience, let them look at it. In that picture, it shows some Muslim women standing there in their robes and the hijab on, and they were not saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And I said, they called up City Hall, and I had without exaggeration, I had over 100 calls to my administrative assistant, and the policy I had with them was that I will call back anybody that wants to call back. So there were some that just vented to her and didn't want to call back, but the ones that did call back, and I explained to them that they did not say the Pledge of Allegiance. As there's one thing about the pledge is that it's a freedom that we have. You don't have a gun to your head to say you must say the Pledge of Allegiance. This is one of the freedoms when you say, well, you know, we fight for our freedoms. This is a freedom that you don't have to say it. That's the real true meaning of freedom. And it's hard for people to understand that. They just say, no, we shouldn't do it. I myself, I like to say the Pledge of Allegiance, but if someone doesn't, that's their freedom they can have. That's what this country's all about. That's what the Constitution stands for. And again, there were many derogatory remarks against the Muslims at that meeting. Someone said, go back to your own country. We only want Christians here. There was a lady in church that told me, she says, Mayor, you like Muslims, but I don't like anyone from the Middle East. I said, well, Jesus was from the Middle East. And then also in our church, Bayless Heights Christian Reformed Church, we after you just get started and they stand up and we're supposed to shake hands with everybody around us. It's a nice tradition. And I go to turn around and that person timed her turn away from me perfectly. And I thought, well, I'll catch you on the way back. And that person wouldn't turn back until I turned forward. I got to the point where they just didn't want to shake my hand. They didn't want to tell me straight out right what they thought of me, but they showed me that, no, we don't like what you're doing. All of this comes from the fear of not knowing who the Muslim people are. That's what it's about. That's why they have these fears. And if one person says a little thing bad about the other ones say, yeah, that's how it travels. That's how the bad news travels around. And during this controversy, we were on Channel 11 when I invited to go down. I was the mayor and 2 aldermen. And the one lady that was in charge of prayer day, we had it that day in Bayless Heights, and Channel 11 correspondent, he asked her to come to the meeting that night at Channel 11, and we discussed this Muslim, non-Muslim problem in Bayless Heights. And she said that on the TV show, she said, I object to false religions coming into Bayless Heights. And at that meeting, it came out that a Muslim resident, the only one Muslim that I actually knew in Bayless Heights made this statement. I know hundreds now, but during that time, I only knew one. And this man says, I think people like this woman have so much love for their religion that they turn on other religions. He added, we have fanatics in our religion too. I thought, boy, hit it right on the head. That's really what the fear is that they think they got so much that nothing else counts. Even our Pope that we have right now, Pope Benedict, he made that mistake. He said that the only Christians are Catholics. I couldn't believe it. I wrote an article. I do write an article, a guest columnist for the Southtown newspaper. That's one of my articles I wrote. And I didn't get many reaction to it, just from St. Hale's people. There was a Muslim teenager at that meeting, I'll never forget him. He says, hey, I grew up here. I play with your kids. I play basketball in this building that we're in now. And now you don't want me to worship in Bayless Heights? That's the first time that audience really quieted down. And he just stared at him. And he just couldn't, you don't want me to worship in this town? know you? He was looking at people that he knew, he was pointing at them, and then he sat down. Well, that meeting lasted till just before midnight. The alderman made a motion to purchase the church for $2.1 million, and get this, to give the Muslims $200,000 to go away. That was part two of that motion. The motion passed by a 5-3 vote. In discussion, they said they wanted recreation. They were hiding behind a veil of hypocrisy. That's all that was. That wasn't right, and they knew it. There's a book written by Lorraine Hansberry. It's called Raisin in the Sun. It's about a white community offered to pay a black family to stay away. This was much like that. The same scene that was in Payless Heights was just like in that book, and it's in a sense that this is what they're trying to do. That meeting, I called a vote an insult and embarrassment to the Muslim people. The very next morning, I wrote a letter of apology to all the congregants of the Al-Salam Mosque and the Muslim community. The rules of veto in the city government is that it must be done at a regularly scheduled meeting, which normally we meet every 2 weeks, but because the 4th of July was there, we never meet on a national holiday, so it's postponed to another 2 weeks. So there was 4 weeks there where we had no council meeting. And they were waiting, contemplating that if I would veto the action of the alderman by a 5-3 vote to purchase the church. And a lot of discussion went on. It was very heated at the time. And I wrote that the government had no place in this matter. I vetoed that action. I had to write a formal letter of a veto, and I did, and I was proud to do it. I just say that if this were another Christian church buying this Christian church, it would not have made any news. It would have been buried on page 12 in a real estate column. When reporters asked me how I arrived at the decision, I told them it was a no-brainer. In grammar school in the 7th grade, I learned of the First Amendment to the Constitution, where it states, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And also, because I am a Christian, I believe in what Jesus said, to love your neighbor. There's no deep theology here. You know what's wrong, so you do what is right. Pastor of my church is Pastor Hamstra. And every Sunday, in one way or another, he either has it in the bulletin or in his prayer or in his sermon, he teaches about love thy neighbor. I'm so appreciative of that fact that he did that. And it meant a lot to me that he did it, especially at that time. I wrote a couple letters to the 11 pastors of the 11 churches in our town to preach sermons on loving thy neighbor. And some did and some wouldn't. So I was proud of the ones that did. It does help. Discrimination is nothing new in the United States. We've seen it used against the American Indians. We drove them from places all over the United States and put them on reservations. And we ended up saying in public documents that they were savages. The African American, we had them in slavery. They were listed as property at one time. They were 3/5 of a person. Imagine that. To figure out who's going to be a representative from an area of the state, they had to do a count of the people. And slaves were counted only as 3/5 of a person. How would you like to be counted as 3/5 of a person? The Irish in Boston, they had a sign in the window, help wanted, no Irish need apply. That's how they came off the boat and into Boston. That was their greeting. Irish don't apply. Japanese Americans, we had 110,000 of them locked up in the concentration camps in mostly Arizona. They took all the Japanese from Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, and New Mexico and put them all in concentration camps when World War II broke out. Some of these same people held in prison in a concentration camp had their sons and daughters in the United States Army. Imagine, they were called the Nisei Japanese. They had discrimination too. And now it seems like the discrimination lands against the Arab Americans and Muslim faith people. It seems like it's sad to say, but it's their turn to get abused, their turn for discrimination. History has seen extremists before in religious matters. the Crusades of 1,000 years ago, when the extremist Christians told the Muslims that if they did not believe in Jesus Christ, they cut their heads off. We have seen extremist Muslims kill Christians in different countries, even during these very times. There are extremist Christians, but not all Christians are extremists. There are extremist Muslims, but not all Muslims are extremists. Extremists for any cause are a danger to all of society. Before 9/11, we had terrorists. One was Timothy McVeigh, an Irish Catholic boy from Oklahoma City. He blew up the Murrah building where 162 people died in 1995. The word on the news that day was that somebody seen Middle Eastern looking people running away from the building. So the news went out that it was Muslims that bombed that building before they found out it was Timothy McVeigh and Mr. McNichols. And we had Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. He lived in Evergreen Park, Illinois. It's just like 15 minutes north of where I live. So that was another extremist because of the reasons they have against their government. Terrorism is a crime. It's not related to a race or a religion. When the government now talks about terrorists or terrorism, immediately the mind goes to Muslims or Arabs. It should not, because it's not. It's a crime. It's not related to a race or a religion. The three major faiths, Christian, Muslim, and Judaism, all believe in the same God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We differ on the identity of Jesus. We have to dwell on what we have in common. When I say that, I mean that when you ever talk with people, you don't start out with a negative thing about, oh, I don't believe it this way, I don't believe it that way, the way you do. Start out with the positive things and say, we believe in the same God. Because the Jew will ascribe to the same God, the Muslim will, and the Christians will. We believe in the same God. People say Muslims believe in Allah. That's not God. Well, let me tell you, Allah is just the Arabic word for God. That's all it is. It's the Arabic word for God. As Christians, we use the word for God. We call him Jehovah, we call him Yahweh, and there's other descriptions of God too. The best thing is dialogue groups. And the United States Justice Department, Mr. Ken Bergeron, an African-American man, he's in charge of community, to go out to communities that have a little bit tension in it, and he called me up. He's mayor, could I have a meeting with you? And I said, sure. He came in, he had another man with him, and he says, we would like to start dialogue groups because we know that people got to get to know each other, and that's why all the tension's happening in your town. I said, I'd be glad to do it. I went to Trinity College, and I asked them if we could borrow a room. It's their boardroom, something like where we had a little dinner tonight. And we used that room for discussion. And I invited the first group to attend. I invited 10 Muslims and 10 non-Muslims. And I don't know what the turnout was, but it was good. And for the first few meetings, everybody was trying to be politically correct in everything they said. Nobody wanted to insult each other. So they were going along like that for about 3 weeks. And then one non-Muslim woman asked a man, a Muslim man who happened to be a doctor, he says, is it true that when you martyr yourself that you go to heaven and you get 72 virgins? He said, no. He says, you got that all wrong. He says, it's one virgin and she's 72 years old. And with that laughter happened there, that broke everybody loose, and then they could ask, it just seems like that's what they needed to break the ice to say, now we can talk. And that's the best thing that ever happened. And that dialogue group has been over 5 years they've been in existence, and they meet on an as-needs basis. If they feel any tension or if they just want to get together, they call a meeting. That's what successful is. But the government even recognized this group as one of the best groups around that started. And I'll give credit to two people, mainly two people, all of them, but mainly Mike Vanderweel is a professor at Trinity College. He takes it for the non-Muslims. And Omar Najib is a Muslim from Payless Park. He does the other. And these guys just get along. They have dinner together. And His Omar's son went to Egypt on a trip that Mike headed for Trinity, one of their trips that they took. It really turned out well. This is the relationships we need. So there was a Catholic lady that said in a newly formed Abrahamic, they call it Abrahamic meetings, three faiths get together. The Catholic lady says, we don't need to convert each other, we just need to come to some respect and understanding. Just last week, the King of Saudi Arabia asked for dialogue with the three faiths. Imagine, Saudi Arabian king says, let's meet, let's have these dialogue groups. I'm so thrilled with that, that's really wonderful. During this time that the controversy went on, the media was really involved in Bayless Heights. Every TV outlet, every public radio, NPR, we had emails from all around the world. BBC even called me up on Sunday morning. We're having coffee and cake with the kids after church, which is another tradition. And you got to have food to make it official, you know. BBC, can we call you back in 2 hours? I said, sure. So they called back, and I thought, well, this is going to be just general questions that they're going to ask. And here they knew every last detail. They do research. I give credit to BBC. They do a fine, thorough job. It's amazing that they were asking me about certain people. And wow. I sat down, I said, I got to be careful. I thought it was just going to be generalities. But I'll give credit to the media. They did a fine job. And the only two mistakes that I remember being made and still being made is, I talked to Professor Schmidt about it earlier, is that church was never vacant. It was always being used for worship. It was not vacant. It said vacant church. It wasn't vacant. And also that one attorney used the phrase that there are 21 churches in Bayless Heights where there's only 11. Those are the only two journalistic mistakes I've seen. As those mistakes can happen, it has nothing to do with anything that would cause any relevancy to anything for it to happen. So they did a fine job as far as covering it. One day I got a phone call. The wife answered the phone and she says, for you. And I said, who is it? She says, Carolyn Kennedy. And I got up out of my lazy boy chair and I said, Carolyn Kennedy, you know? And it's like, what's going on here, you know? And I answers, hello, and she said, are you Dean? I said, yes. She's, well, you're the recipient of the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award for 2002. And I said, wait a minute. Are you the Carolyn Kennedy? I knew what the award was. I heard of it, but it's just like, what? Carolyn Kennedy? So this award is given, it's over here, most of you have seen it already. If not, please do after. It's given to an elected official who makes a decision of conscience that is right, but generally not popular. And I wasn't popular. The person that got the award with me is Dr. Schmidt said earlier, was Kofi Annan, and I got to meet him. I even asked him for his autograph, and I got it. And also the Heroes of 9/11. This award of Heroes of 9/11 stays in the Boston Library, the John F. Kennedy Library, and it was given to anybody that helped out at 9/11, any rescue service of any kind. It's good for all. And those receiving that award for these people was Lieutenant Colonel Wills of the Army, where she was in the Pentagon and led about 60 people to safety because she knew a pathway through smoke and fire. And she was there and gave a very dramatic speech, and it was really nice. And the fireman of New York representative was there, a man who had lost his arm. And also the police officers from a couple different communities around, they all stood up there and made little speeches and got the award for them. That stays in the library in Boston. Carolyn Kennedy says, you would have got this award last year, meaning 2001. She said, but we had to give it to President Gerald Ford, your former Michigander. And I said, what happened? He says, well, we called him up and says, you're the recipient. And then he called back and he said, my wife don't want me to go. Well, why not? Well, she don't think I can hold up that well. I wasn't that physically able to go to Boston and do all this. And they persuaded him, try to go back and forth. And for a few days, they were going back and forth with it as to should he do it or should he do it? And he finally got talked into it, and his wife got talked into letting him go. So I didn't know about none of this until she called me, and she says, so that's why you're here this year, you know, so it was fun. And as far as the award, all the things that went on in Boston, I had my all the married kids there, and 9 of my 10 grandkids. One was just too little. And we had a ball there. And after the award ceremonies, we had a dinner together with the Kennedys and the Koldenhovens because Kofi Annan had to leave for business that he had to take care of, and Ted Kennedy really knows how to throw a party. He's a good guy. He can loosen up a crowd real quick. I cannot talk about the controversy in Payless Heights without the thought of my 35-year-old son, Don, who died of esophageal cancer at the very height of this controversy. This award is a special meaning for his memory also. As Carolyn Kennedy has said, after people die, they really do live on through those who love them. Father Cronin was there at the funeral, along with Reverend Sam Hamstra, and I asked our pastor if he could, if Reverend Cronin could be participant of this funeral. He said certainly. They were buddies already. They got along well. They worked together with this Muslim controversy, and they had a letter put together composed of 9 of the 11 churches that wanted to sign this letter, and Reverend Hamstra and Father Cronin did that together. And when I invited Father Cronin to do the prayer at the funeral, I knew some eyebrows would be raised, but everybody that went to that funeral, they all said afterwards that, where did this, we got to get him back. He prayed from the heart. There was not the usual prayer out of a book or anything like that. He prayed from the heart. And before he prayed, he talked to Sam that just got through with a message, about a 15-minute message, and he just added to it. And it's just like, what a pair, these two guys. Here's a Roman Catholic priest and a Christian Reformed minister doing a funeral service. It was something good to see. And I got a card. My usual thing that the administrative assistant does is open the mail for me, and she sorts out the junk mail from the official mail. And she gives me both, but she makes 2 separate piles. And she came in the room and she said, in my office, and she said, you know, that I normally give you all your mail. I never hold anything back, but I got a card that I'm going to hold back from you. I don't want you to see it. I said, well, now I got to see it. See what it is. So it was a postcard. The picture on it was nondescript, but on the back it said, they buried the wrong Koldenhoven. And I just, she left the room, and I turned on Aretha Franklin, and that was my rescue, was her singing gospel songs. And these aldermen, they found out my son died on a Monday. Thursday was going to be buried. They called for a special meeting on Friday. It takes 3 aldermen to sign for a special meeting. On Tuesday morning, they walked into City Hall and asked for a special meeting on Friday. They figured that because of the funeral that I wouldn't be there, that I wouldn't show up, and they could get this motion through before I had a chance to veto it. That was their plan. It backfired. But walking into the meeting, it was great. It's like coming in through those back doors, and then people are all sitting down for me to come up here. And Mike Vanderweel puts his hand up and he says, sterkte. Well, sterkte is the Dutch word for strength. And with that, it gave me strength. You know, it just like, that was enough for Mike to just did it spontaneously. And I always thank him for that. And looking back how things happened, looking really back, I prayed, but I'm a short prayer guy. And, it's meaningful, and I talk with God, and I know God likes to slap me once in a while, but I look at when God gave me the strength, even when I didn't ask Him. He really did. He gave me that strength to do what I did. And there's nothing on my own that I could have done it with my strength, but I needed God's strength. And with that, He really did do it. And now there's page 2, as Paul Harvey used to say in the radio. After the Muslim, I read the veto and it was over, that opened the door for the Muslims to buy the church. But they didn't. They decided not to, and they gave us a lawsuit. They turned around and sued us all. They sued the alderman and myself for $1 million each, and they sued the city of Bayless Heights for $6.2 million on civil rights charges that we didn't give them the freedom to worship in the city of Bayless Heights. Judge Gerald had it in court for 1 week. This was postponed to the year 2005. From 2000 to 2005, continuances were always asked, and the judge gave it. I look at the wisdom of that judge, and I thought, I know why he did it. I know why he gave them every continuance they asked for. It's because he thought, I'm not going to make any mistakes. You're not going to say the judge tried to rush it. And when you're ready, he would do it. And that's what he did. And we had the trial, and the verdict was in favor of Bayless Heights. They attacked me, and that was the one thing that I couldn't figure out what the other side does. The attorney for the Muslim people, they hired a civil rights attorney, a separate person that's really gifted at civil rights law. And they went after me mostly, and I was on the stand for 2 days in a row. And it didn't work out, so the verdict was in our favor. The same week that we had the lawsuit, the Anti-Discrimination League of the Arab People gave me an award. Now, get this, the lawyer that hands me the award was the one suing us. These are the things you just got to swallow hard and say, okay, this is, you got to do it. And reporters asked me, they said, what do you think of the verdict? I said, well, if you tell the truth, the story never changes. And that's really what it was. That's the nice thing about truth, is that even 5 years later, you got a memory that could jar you just like that, and nothing changes. You don't have to think about, what did I say 5 years ago? No, it was, nothing changed. So that's why I think we won the cases, because we didn't have nothing to hide. And I got a phone call. I picked the phone up myself this time, not the wife, and it was from the Department of State. And at the time, I was writing for the Southtown as a guest columnist, and I write for political issues and religious issues. And I thought, oh boy, they're going to call me and tell me, don't knock George Bush, because I've been knocking Bush a lot. 3 years ago, I was knocking him, so I had a new guy on the street doing it. I just, that's another subject. Anyhow, they invited me. They said, hey, we'd like you to go to Russia. We have a plan with the State Department where we pay a translator to translate books from America that would help with the democracy of the Russian people. And they said, we'd like you to go there and present the book that's been completed and give it to the Russian people at the American Embassy in Moscow. I said, yeah, well, sure. That was a good deal. And the wife and my daughter went, and they had to fly separately because the plane that I was on was a special fare, and the State Department cannot use any other airline but an American airline. And I had to fly separately, and they took their plane. So when we met that Friday afternoon in Moscow, it was our 50th wedding anniversary. And that was a nice way to remember it. Just went to the Pushkin Hotel and had a great dinner from the rooftop of the Pushkin Hotel, and it was really a nice way for being there. The book, which later on I'll give to Dr. Schmidt, is John F. Kennedy's actual profile and courage in the Russian language, and I can donate this to the Kelvin Library after we're through here. And I had to go to different bookstores and present it, and democracy means so much to the Russian people. When they can read these stories about these 8 senators in this book, it'll help them understand democracy a little better. And we had 7 days in Moscow, and then the wife and daughter had to leave back to the States because that was the end of the Moscow trip, and I had to go 3 days to Kiev in Ukraine, and had the same experience there. Those people really want their democracy, and it's so good to see that what they'll do for it. And they love to hear about our ways. And the reason I think I got invited back to go to the second time to Moscow is, I got home on a Saturday, by the way, and Monday morning email says, can you come in September and do it again, only for 3 different cities in the Ural Mountains? I said, yes, be glad to. I like to travel free, you know. It was in an area where, in Yekaterinburg, where the Russian Orthodox Church had their problems with the Baptist people. This is Christian on Christian. Now, you Muslims were free. They had the thing going where so bad that they firebombed the Baptist church. And the State Department gave me a 53-page brief on this about what's going on in town, and I had to meet with these people. And it was the best meeting of the whole trip. It was supposed to be a 1-hour meeting, and it ended up being 3.5 hours. And we got to go around the table, and they had a good translator. The guy was fast, and he could do it very well. And we made sense of a lot of things that happened there. And it ended up so well that they passed the clipboard around for another meeting. Again, dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. If you talk about it, you can get rid of a lot of these anxieties and a lot of these fears. And I understand it's going well. The Consulate General in Yekaterinburg said things are going well there now. So I'm so glad to hear that it worked out that way. So the Russian trip was really well worth it. There was one man, while I was talking at American Corners in Russia is, and also in Ukraine, is a place where these people can go and learn everything in English, and speak English at the place, and learn all about American history. And they get our papers, and they get everything, books and everything, they exchange, and they have a good time. And they get speakers there, and they like to come. They came out, and in the front row there was a man with his, it turned out to be his daughter, and she was interpreting for him as I was speaking, because they don't use an interpreter at American Corners, so she was interpreting for him very quietly, not annoying at all. And after the meeting, questions and answers, and nothing was asked. And then we break for the cookies and lemonade, which I always stayed for because I don't want to be the ugly American that runs away. I wanted to talk to all the people. And she came up to me, she said, can my dad talk to you? I said, sure. And I said, what? And she interpreted, and he says, I was on the Russian ships that brought the missiles to Cuba. But he says, I was also on the ships that brought the missiles back from Cuba to Russia. He says, you American people hate us for that. And the guy was emotional about it. And I said, no. I said, the American people that I know don't hate you. I says, governments do what governments do. But the people are not to blame for that. The American people and the Russian people, I think, can get along fine. And he was so moved by that he must have had this on his mind for a long time, that we ended up giving each other an embrace. It was really good to see, really good to be there. And then just recently, Harvard University did a case study on this whole controversy, and they were studying it since the year 2000, and they're just about completed. They just got to add one little chapter about Orland Park, a town just south of us that got a mosque in it now, and they have no problems at all. They had a little bit of a problem, nothing like we had. I think they learned from our mistakes, and they went right through, and the mosque is up, and everything is fine, no problems at all. So it's a nice, fine building. Well, you may be confronted with a situation in your life when you have to make a decision that is right but not popular. I hope that it will be easy for you, as I said earlier, a no-brainer. Students here, what you have learned here at Calvin College and from your parents or guardians and in your spiritual life as to what is right from wrong will possibly be tested someday. And for everyone here, as well as the students, it is my hope that you choose what is right. Thank you. I'd like to present this book for Calvin College to Dr. Schmidt. That's the Russian translation of Profiles in Courage, the original book. And this book here, Profiles in Courage for Our Time, is written and edited, introduced and edited by Carolyn Kennedy, just stories about the people who got the award so far. Thank you for coming to College Library.
We're going to have time for questions and answers. If you want to stand up, feel free to do so. There is a mic back there in case you may need a little extra help. I'm going to field the questions and then we'll ask Mr. Koldenhoven to answer. But let's see if anybody has questions to begin with. Go ahead.
What did you know about the Muslim religion prior to this? What did you do to educate yourself?
I really was a dummy. I did not know about it. I did very little. And like I said, I only knew one Muslim person in my town. That's all I knew. And I got to be educated by being the Muslims invited me to their mosque. They invited me to their school. They invited me to their meetings. I ate a lot of hummus. Those of you who knows what hummus food is, that's one good food I do like, and it was good because I don't like to tell people I don't like what kind of food they got. That wouldn't be good. But I got to know them, and like I said, it was a privilege knowing these people, and I still get along real good with them. But I knew nothing of their religion. I had to educate myself, bought a few books, and start reading, and got my homework done. Thank you for the question.
Go ahead. Yep.
Yes, sir. I don't have anything about politically about people's freedom of religion, but you say it's the same God. Not according to Scripture, sir. It's God of the Quran has no son. Okay, Jesus Christ is God. You read the verse in 1 John chapter 5, verse 19. We know that we are of God, and the whole world lies under the sway of the wicked one. And we know that the Son of God has come and has given us all an understanding that we may know him who is true, and who are in him who is true. And we are in him who is true. In his Son, Jesus Christ. This is the true God and eternal life. See, the generic name for God is not the same name as Allah. Allah is a separate God. He was one of many gods, and that religion didn't come about until 600 BC. So to say that it's the same God, it isn't true. It also says in the Quran, okay, that not to take Christians and Jews as friends. Now, I don't care, I'm not out to say anything about Muslims. I want them to come to the knowledge of truth and to be saved through Jesus Christ. But you cannot say it's the same God, sir.
They believe in the same God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, like I said earlier. That is scholars will all agree with that statement.
No, they won't, sir.
Well, excuse me, but okay, that's your opinion. And the other thing is, here's what the Jews believe about Jesus. They believe that Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary. They believe that Jesus was a prophet. They don't say he's the Son of God. They say he's with God. And that's what they believe. My point is that I still say they believe in the same God because I've read up on that. And also that the scholars do agree on it as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They don't believe in Jesus the way the Christians believe, whereas the Jewish people, they don't believe anything about Jesus other than he was a carpenter. So the Muslims do believe in Jesus as a prophet. Am I right? Muslim people, thank you. Go ahead. Thank you for your question. I appreciate it.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Dean, I wonder if you expected any more from the church. Could the church have supported you? I guess I hear you saying that you heard love your neighbor, which is typical stuff that preachers say. But I wonder if the church could have assisted if a lawyer, a member of your congregation, a fellow Christian, is on the opposition side. Could the church, should the church, did the church do anything more than the preacher saying nice things about loving your neighbor.
No, the church did not chastise any people that did the things that were not right. Sam kept a positive note from the pulpit, and he also helped work along with Father Cronin as far as the church goes. Nobody was chastised for what they did. Other than the sermons, he just kept preaching love.
Consider Jews and Christians superior to you. You are all the same. You know, there is lots of things that takes place around in the U.S. that is lost in the Constitution. And if you really go through and study comparative religion, there is lots of things in the Bible that is lost in the Constitution, from Aramaic to Greek to Roman. So don't take somebody translating the word from the Quran by his own limited abilities in terms of English versus that.
So you're saying that all the English translations of the Quran are wrong?
It's 85% for that.
Huh?
It's 85% for that.
I think it'd be better if you guys want to go out in the hall and have a dialogue room, please do. Let's keep it to just questions for me at the time. Thank you.
I was wondering if you could talk about the veto process. Was your veto upheld by the alderman? Was that the reason that that occurred? That they didn't? You said originally the vote was 5-3. I presume you were one of the three that voted against it.
No, the vote was 5-3 to purchase it.
Right. You were one of the.
The mayor did not vote. We got 8 aldermen. Yeah, I'll explain that. We have 8 aldermen. The vote was 5-3. Now, the time that the 4 weeks that, or I should say the 2 weeks that went by after the veto to the next meeting, the regularly scheduled meeting, was 3 days after my son's funeral at the Tuesday night meeting. One of the aldermen had such a change of heart that voted for that. So many people called him up after the vote, after they heard what went on, that he changed his mind. He said, no way, he would not vote that way again. And they did not have enough votes to overturn my veto. They needed 6 votes to overturn me. They need 2/3, and they did not have it. So that's a good legal question.
You mentioned the demographics of Alice when you were younger. I'm wondering, between 2000 and 2008, what are the demographics? You mentioned 400 Muslim families. What area? South American, what countries specifically? If you know any of that information, that's one question. And then the second one is, why were you being sued and didn't understand why they were being sued?
That's the most asked question I've answered on this whole thing. Why did they sue me? And even the Russian students had that question at the Russian universities. It was really good. They'd come up with that question first. How could they sue you? And because they did research on this thing before I got there. And the answer I gave them is this, and I'll answer it like walking into Kelvin here. I walk through the front door, go up a couple stairs, and I trip on the stairs and I'm really injured. I sue the stair manufacturer, the guy that put the concrete in the steel thing is there, he gets sued, the carpet person gets sued, the painter gets sued to paint a railing, everybody gets sued. And then finally, when it goes to court, the judge throws this out, this out, this out, and this out. Then it's down to maybe 1 or 2 things that people are going to get sued if they get sued. But what happened in this suit that we had, the judge immediately threw out the $1 million suits against the alderman and the mayor. He said, if we would not have elected officials serving in office, if every decision they made they got sued for, so they are not to be held in suit. I'm surprised that the civil rights attorney didn't know that before he charges, but I think he was trying to be dramatic. And he did get the drama, so, but yeah, he got that, the counts were out. It ended up being 2 counts, and that was on freedom of worship and not giving them the freedom of worship. But those counts were eliminated in the court case. Okay, I'll finish that. The first part, It was demographics. I really don't know exact demographics, but no Muslims moved out. They all stayed. So it's about the same.
Did it become more diverse? Was it just Muslim, Irish, Catholic, and Dutch?
No, it's a good mixture in our town. There's a lot of Christian Reform and Reform people and a lot of Dutch and Irish. We got a good mixture. But there were, because of the controversy, we did find out how many Muslim people there were. And the Muslims knew the figures because they know who's going to the mosque and who isn't, and what mosque they go to. So yeah, they're just like us. They play the Dutch bingo in a different way. No, who's going, who isn't.
The Danish cartoons, which I think we're all familiar with, were printed in one newspaper in this country, the Rocky Mountain News. Any comment about that?
Well, I'm torn between freedom of the press and freedom of speech and all those things combined. I think that we got to be careful not to hurt other people's religion. I think we should respect all religions, no matter what they are, and have a discussion with it from there. I felt bad that this cartoonist did what he did with a picture like that. Although I can think back of other religions during Christmas time that they made fun of Jesus' birth thing being in a manger in the city of Chicago because all at once some people wanted the creche where Jesus laid as a baby, wanted that removed from the city display of Christmas. And they made some ugly cartoons about that. These things, I think, in good sense, shouldn't be done. But again, I'm torn between the freedom of the press and thing to be able to do this. And I would hope that the Muslim people know that the world doesn't all think this, that there may be a few. But again, I think the more we discuss these things, the easier it'll be for even Muslims not to feel this way. I get some heads going up and down here. I'm glad to see that. But that's a good question. Thank you.
I just wanted to tell you how much the Muslim community really respects and appreciates the standing. I don't want to think it's any coincidence that it happened before 9/11 and that the war comes after 9/11. And I would just like to know if you could tell us if you ever have even an inkling of regret for this one.
Not one inkling of regret at all. None at all. No. A lot of reasons, but my family was 100% behind me. We discussed it openly. We sit around our table and there's nothing, no holds barred in our conversation in our house. And all 10 grandkids and the married ones and even my grandson's girlfriend, she's here tonight. And she knows that everything is discussed in our house. There's nothing held back. I have no regrets at all. I would do the same decisions over. Not at all. It made me a stronger Christian by having this experience. And American too. It's good to know the Constitution and what it stands for, and also Jesus said, "Love your neighbor." That's what matters to me.
A sister college, Trinity Christian College in Bayless Heights. Did you get support from the leaders of that college during this ordeal?
Yes, I did. Yes. I got the support there, and also a friend of mine, Dr. Annalee Ward, was a friend to Ellen Heckman. She's here at Calvin. They're best of friends. They went to school together, high school, and I think grade school, and also Calvin College together. I speak twice a year in her classes since this all began. We have a good thing there, and the history teacher and the social teacher used me for speaking there too. And it's a good time every year. And the college, Mike Vanderweel, as a professor there, he was all in it too. And the professors were of nice words of encouragement from that community. Yes, I have nothing but the highest respect for Trinity in this. Nice question, thank you.
It's just, 10 years later, after the event has happened, what do you think the status of religious law is in the United States today, and what do you think that is going as a country based on the freedom of religion?
Okay, the question was, where are we going from here, right? And with all this experiences. The only way we're going to get along is direct dialogue. groups gotta form and say, hey, I wanna get to know these people. This dialogue group in Payless Heights got to know each other so well they go out for dinner together. And that's a nice, not all of them, but you know, a few that took a liking to each other. And it goes from there. So dialogue is the answer. And even on a world stage, I would hope that our government will see it. I know what this administration won't, but better to greet people that, you know, talk with even our so-called enemies, you know, to say, I don't want to go unless you get this condition, this condition, this condition. That's no way to start a friendship. That's no way to have any talks about important matters. You gotta have say, let's put everything off the table. Let's go and meet at a certain location. Let's talk about things that concern our countries. And the same thing about religions. The people of the Christian Reformed Church meet with the Muslim group in Grand Rapids here, all the better. And get those little things that you're hiding behind questions and say, hey, I'll be open with them all. You know, if you got questions, I know you people will be answered. Christian Reformed people, Reformed, everybody. They gotta start talking to each other. That's the answer. Thank you. Anyone else?
A couple more, I know, sure.
Just for clarity, when you were quoting earlier, you were just making a comment or two. First of all, you said, I appreciate and commend you for all your service, everything that you've done, and the traveling you've done. It's appreciated as an American citizen. But one thing, the first thing I heard that you had said was that the Jews believe that Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary.
No. I said the Muslims believe that. Oh, if I said it, I was wrong. Be like Hillary, I misspoke. No, here's what I said about the Jews, is that they know Jesus as a carpenter, and that's all they know him. They don't accept him as a Messiah, as a Jesus, a Savior, none of that. They just say he was a carpenter. That's all. Where the Muslims believe that he was born of the Virgin Mary, and they say he's a prophet, not the Son of God, but he's with God. So they got some belief, but that's the part that dialogue groups can bring out, and they can go through these issues. When the man from the Justice Department came to Payless Heights, he wanted to keep religion out of it. And get this now, the Muslims and the Christians, they said, no, we got to talk this out or else we'll never get it out of on the table, what's really bothering us here. So the man from Ken Berger under the Justice, he couldn't get over that. They could peaceably talk about religion and it really worked. He just thinks this is the most amazing project that was ever done for his job. He kept it going on. He was a facilitator of those meetings, so he enjoyed going to himself. Thank you for your question. There's a lady back here.
Are you aware that your story was very, some of us are very despairing of Christian leadership, and that your story just had a great impact on a lot of people because of the courage you took and the stand you took for loving your neighbor? Were you aware that that had an effect?
Well, I'm aware of it coming from you. That was very nice. Thank you very much. That was nice. Yes, I've had some people say that to me. Yes, and I go to Starbucks every morning and read my Morning Sun-Times and get all the gossip, and then I enjoy my coffee. And then the people got to know me from sitting there. And through the years, people from Payless Heights that were totally against me, they do come in, they walk over and they say, you know what, we were wrong in what we did and how we felt, so thanks for doing that. That feels good. There's only been a handful, but that does feel good. And so, you know, but I still wouldn't change my mind on anything, so I still would do it the same way as, you know, you asked. But thank you for that very, very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Negligent in that I should have introduced Karen Henry and Jim Stokes, Karen Henry Stokes and Jim Stokes. Karen, the wife of Paul Henry, and we want to acknowledge your presence here and thank you for attending. So please, you're all invited to the reception afterwards outside. Thank you for your attendance and your patience and for your good questions, and we'll look forward to talking with you out there. Thank you.